Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. All the characters in the story who enter into intimate relationships are over 18 years old. It wasn't completely dark in the room, but the curtains were drawn and I had only one lamp on. I could probably watch TV or drink, but I just didn't feel like it. I showered and shaved before putting on my most comfortable clothes. It was going to be a long night, and I wanted to get ready. It was important for me to stay sober, even if I wanted to get drunk. I've had a pretty stressful day, and I'm dead tired. Sitting on the couch, I tried to figure out where I had gone wrong, and then decided that I had not. She cheated on me, and it was her fault, not mine. However, I would have to pay for it. Whatever happened, the job was done. 12 years of marriage have gone to waste. Fortunately, there were no children. 3 years ago, when Natalie became pregnant for the first time, she suffered a severe miscarriage, and this deprived her of any chance of starting a family. We were both upset by this tragedy, but I never thought it would end with her having an affair. I kept glancing at my watch. Who's coming here first? Is it my unfaithful wife, or one of the many agencies responsible for peace and tranquility in the District of Columbia? It could be the FBI, the CIA, local or state police, or even national security. A cold beer would undoubtedly be very useful right now. The farmhouse in Warrenton was far enough away from the city that I didn't have to worry too much about political shit. A year after the miscarriage, Natalie got a job as an advertising agent for a political lobbying firm, and she had to drive to work for a long time every day. She complained a little about it, but the joy of working seemed to make up for any inconvenience. At first, Natalie was delighted with her new job and was happy to tell me about all the interesting people she talked to during her working days. I always listened and paid attention. At some point, I noticed that she had constant contact, which she never mentioned. He was a man we both knew and were actually friends with. The fact that she avoided any conversation about him was disturbing. Malcolm Eugene Hurd was one of the senators from our home state of Indiana. Natalie and I studied at Indiana University with Malcolm and his wife Sonia. As Malcolm rose in the political arena, we kind of drifted apart, but we still exchanged Christmas cards. Natalie's company was responsible for advertising Malcolm's campaign and his contacts with voters back home. Over the past year, I have seen several photos of the senator in newspapers and magazines, in which Natalie was visible in the background. There were a few short TV spots where he was meeting people, and she was standing next to him and smiling. In such circumstances, she would be invisible to most people, but not to me. She never once mentioned that she had seen Malcolm or talked to him. I certainly felt that it was unusual. I worked from home and rarely traveled outside of Washington. I had a small but successful retirement account management business for companies with fewer than 100 employees. Most of my competitors wanted to focus on larger clients, so I had a free field of activity. I didn't earn much, but I was comfortable and I enjoyed my work, especially since I could carry out all operations at home, without staff in the office. It was easy to get paranoid about the whole situation. It was harder to check if something was really happening, or if it was my imagination. A private investigator was out of the question. There's no way I could afford to hire someone to find out the ins and outs of an American senator. In desperation, I bought 3 small portable GPS navigators. They ran on battery power for 11 hours and recorded all the places Natalie went during the working day. She mostly drove along and around the ring road until she reached Alexandria. I didn't have the opportunity to use devices to monitor her, but I still didn't want to do it in traffic jams in Washington. I thought I could use one of them every day for 3 days and then use the weekend to keep an eye on the breadcrumbs. If she had been cheating, then maybe something would have come out. Of course, the GPS navigators worked much better than I expected. In the first 3 days that I used them, she stayed in a hotel apartment near Reston twice. I had no problems verifying that room 214 was rented by U.S. Senator Malcolm Hurd. I didn't know how long she had been there, but it really didn't matter. I probably could have shared my new information with her and given her the opportunity to give me an explanation, but I never did. Over the next few days, I followed Natalie out of the house and drove to Reston. I found a quiet, secluded place and made myself comfortable. On the second day, Malcolm arrived in a big black Mercedes. 10 minutes later, Natalie appeared. It took more than 2 hours before they went out and separated separately. My marriage is over. It's time to plan. 3 different companies offered to buy my small business. I quietly transferred the money to a long-term offshore account. The amount I paid for the house exceeded the current estimate, so I decided I could give it up. Nothing else seemed to matter. They met twice on Tuesday, so I used that as a starting point for planning. On Monday, I spent the whole day typing letters and pasting labels with addresses. By 4 o'clock, more than 200 envelopes with stamps were ready. The next day, like today, everything went according to plan. First, I attached a bright orange smoke bomb to the ignition of Malcolm's car and then carefully cut all the valve rods at Natalie's. Malcolm's car will not be damaged, but it will be unusable until it is cleaned. Before returning home, I mailed all the envelopes. The first stage has been completed. Natalie arrived home ahead of all the federal agents I expected. When she entered the room, she took off her coat. Her purse fell onto the side table with a loud thud. I noticed her fleeting glance, but she didn't say anything. Finally, she sat down right in front of me and sighed. I had to ask one of the girls from work to give me a ride home. I didn't say or do anything. That was a pretty radical thing to do, Robert. How did she know it was me? It could have been a vandal or someone who had political views. I didn't answer. You could have said something. Why did you have to do that? Why didn't Malcolm give you a ride home? You know perfectly well why. We had to tow both cars. I'm sorry if I inconvenienced you. There were police and reporters there. 2 television crews arrived. I know. I called them. You're a freak. It was terrible and presumptuous. Malcolm is running for a second term. If they found out what really happened, it would take away his chances. I hope so. She seemed to be trying not to cry. She couldn't do anything. Natalie, what was I supposed to do? You cheated on me with a man I thought was my friend. Does Sonia know what's going on? No. Of course not. I hope she still doesn't know. They have 3 children, Robert. Do you have any idea how this will affect their family? Oh, it's nothing. Things are going to get a lot worse in the next few days. How can it get any worse? Nothing could be worse than this. Well, for starters, the police will be coming for me soon. Why? Neither Malcolm nor I ever mentioned your name. How did he explain this to the authorities? He just said that it was someone who disagreed with his political views. Well, it kind of derailed my plan before it even started going through. I expected to be taken to some interrogation room and subjected to thorough processing. Robert, do you want to talk about this? Will I have a chance to explain what happened? No. I got up and went to the kitchen. If the police don't come, I'm going to have a beer. Natalie, I don't want to know what you did, why you did it, and when you did it. It doesn't matter. You can move out or stay. I just don't give a damn, but please don't even try to justify yourself. I went out on the porch. It was cool for this time of year. The beer was delicious, but coffee would have been better. I didn't have a reconciliation plan, and I had no idea why she did what she did. I didn't want to know. When I returned, Natalie had already gone into the bedroom and closed the door behind her. I took another beer and sat down on the couch again. It was going to be a long night. About an hour later, my wife returned to the living room. It was obvious that she was crying. She carefully sat down on the chair closest to me and began to wring her hands. Robert, what did you mean when you said it would only get worse? Today I sent a letter to Sonia. I also sent 221 copies of the letter to all newspapers, radio stations, and TV channels in the area. Copies were received by all members of the U.S. Senate, as well as the FBI, CIA, NSA, and the Department of Homeland Security. All the members of our family received one gift, and each name is on the list of Christmas cards. Each Fox commentator received his own letter. Your boss and everyone you work with also received one gift each. Oh my God, no. What is this letter? Who do you think will believe the accusations of a madman? Do you really have irrefutable evidence that something was going on? Or are you still guessing? You're going to look like a complete fool, Robert. Worse than that, they'll call me crazy. Do you think I care? I have no life, and I have nothing to hope for. I'm going down, but I'm not going down alone. I think you overestimate the power that your letter will have. Public figures constantly receive such letters. They have a special file on them. Then I guess I wasted my time. I think it's good for you and Malcolm. If you don't mind, I'll sleep on the couch tonight. I took the coverlet off the back of the sofa and started making the bed. Can I at least look at the letter? I went to the table, took a piece of paper from the top drawer, and handed it to her. It was quite short, and it only took her a few seconds to read it. "Oh no, Robert, you didn't send this. Please tell me you didn't do it." She fell into a chair and began to cry. The letter fell to the floor. "Dear Sonia, if Malcolm sees Natalie again or even contacts her, I will kill all 3 of your children. Your friend Robert Sorensen." This is not what a normal person would write. Of course, I didn't mean anything like that, but I felt it was necessary to create a shocking effect. I was sure that I would be arrested as soon as the letter was published, and I would be subjected to the harshest treatment. I didn't care. If I had been ranting like a cuckolded husband, the letter would have been ignored. The threat to the lives of the children of an American senator would undoubtedly attract attention. Natalie got up and staggered into the bedroom. "At the earliest, the mail will be delivered tomorrow, around 9 o'clock. I thought I could get one more night's sleep before everything turned to shit. The next morning I got up cheerful and early. Fortunately, I had a razor in the car, which I used on the way to the nearest diner. I ate a specialty for breakfast, and on the way back I bought a pack of chewing gum. I'd prefer a toothbrush, but today I'll have to make do with chewing gum. I tried to kill as much time as possible, but I knew that sooner or later I would have to return to the house. When I got home, there was a black sedan and a state police car parked in front of the house. I never got to the door. Natalie was standing on the porch in her bathrobe when the FBI agents took me away, accompanied by police officers. For the next few days, I either gave interviews or kept quiet. Because of the letter, I missed most of the bickering that was going on. I was never charged with any serious charges, but the term terrorist threat was often used. I felt strangely satisfied throughout the whole process. People were constantly trying to intimidate me, and I found it funny. I haven't heard from Natalie since I was taken away. There was never any mention of bail. I've never even met with a lawyer. I've never been transferred to a real prison or correctional facility. I was being held in a secure area of the federal building. I was isolated in a way, but I was never abused or abused. After a while, I got the feeling that people were trying to avoid me and avoid any confrontation. Things didn't go the way I expected because I thought I was going to be accused of something. I think I didn't plan it well. At the moment, all I could do was go with the flow. I've never asked for a lawyer, and I've never been offered one. At one point, I was expecting my wife's visit, but it never happened. Instead, Malcolm's wife, Sonia, visited me. We were left alone in a small room. I was not tied up in any way, and there were no guards nearby. I'm sure there were some kind of listening devices in the room, and there was an ordinary large one-way mirror on the wall. "Hi, Robert." All I could bring myself to do was nod. I did a terrible thing to this woman and had no idea how to make amends. "Can I get an explanation or something like that?" "I'm sorry, Sonia. The best thing I can do is apologize to you. What I did was stupid, but I was desperate. I never wanted to hurt you or the kids, and I think you know that. It was the only way to get attention. Was it important to you? I couldn't compete with Malcolm, and you know it. He's powerful, rich, and quite charismatic. I hated the fact that I had lost Natalie because of him, and also that there was no way to repay him for the pain he had caused me. Well, it looks like you did a damn good job." All I could do was look at her questioningly. Malcolm was called back to Indiana to meet with the state Democratic Party committee and discuss the incident. Robert, it wasn't the first time he screwed up, but it was the first time his people couldn't hush it up. People who support politicians have ways to keep order, but you've stymied them with your lightning strike. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? At the moment, I believe that Malcolm's political career is over. That's fair enough. So is my marriage. Sonia smiled faintly at me. "Robert, I need a favor. After what I did to you, would you consider asking me for help? What can I do for you? I'm planning to divorce Malcolm, and I'd like to know if you have any evidence of his affair with Natalie. I'm sorry, but I can't help you. All I know is that Malcolm rented a hotel room in Reston, and they often went there together to be alone. I don't have any videos, photos, or audio recordings. As far as I know, they could play Scrabble together. Malcolm hates Scrabble." We both had a little laugh. There was silence for a few moments. I felt uncomfortable because I couldn't shave or tidy myself up for several days. Sonia was perfect in every way. She looked better now than when we were in college. From a clumsy teenager, she turned into a beautiful woman. Malcolm had everything: power, position, family, and a wonderful wife. Why would this freak want to take away mine? Sonia got up from her chair, making it clear that our little conversation was over. May I visit you again, Robert? Of course. I would be glad of that. She left, and I felt a little sad. I threatened the lives of her children in front of the whole world, and she never raised her voice at me or showed in any way that she was upset with me. It was as if she knew what I was trying to do and understood why I was doing it. 2 hours later, I was escorted out of the federal building and taken home. They unceremoniously dumped me in front of my house and disappeared. No explanation was given, and not a word was spoken during the entire trip. The house was empty. All of Natalie's things were gone. I didn't know where her car was. I turned off my phone and spent the next few days in front of the TV. I felt a perverse sense of guilt watching all the chaos I had caused. For some reason, the media seemed more interested in this case than in my threats. After 2 days of no outside contact, I finally called my parents to let them know that everything was fine. On my first day out, I bought 2 six-pack beers and 10 frozen dinners. I waited until the last photographer left. I hope my 15 minutes of fame are over. I thought about calling Natalie's parents and sisters and trying to find her, but I couldn't think of a reason. I decided to wait and not make a fuss. I still had a small amount of money in my bank account abroad. I had no idea what to do with them. I had enough money at the local bank to last a few more months, and then I had to make some kind of lifestyle decision. What was I going to do to make a living? The answer came from an unexpected source. Malcolm Hurd was no longer his party's candidate for re-election. He didn't take the news too kindly. The media ignored his objections and tirades, but Fox did not give up. The more he screamed, the more Fox bullied him. His main mistake was taking out his anger on his wife. Sonia put an end to his nonsense by stabbing him with a 20-centimeter kitchen knife. There was ample evidence that she stabbed him in self-defense, including the babysitter who was a witness. However, the complexity of the situation led Sonia into confusion and her children into a real nightmare. 2 days later, a small, inconspicuous car picked me up at my house and took me to a lawyer. The secretary from the law firm of Barnes and Griffin informed me that they needed to meet with me as soon as possible on urgent business. They didn't provide any other information, but the invitation was so intriguing that I accepted it. I couldn't even get in through the front door. We parked at the back and entered through the fire exit. I am sure that the room I was shown into was not one of those designed for high-class clients. It seemed that this was done on a voluntary basis, but there was no point in it. Mr. Sorensen, my name is Wilfred Malik. I was chosen to make you a special offer. He was very obese and sweated a lot, although it wasn't that warm outside. I assumed he was about 50 years old. His thinning hair was combed back and his face was glowing with blush. What do you mean by you were chosen? He looked at me strangely. I think he was confused because I questioned his choice of words instead of asking about the offer he was going to make. Why are we in this small room, Mr. Malik? I have a feeling that you are trying to hide me. You're very perceptive, Mr. Sorensen. We were instructed not to advertise this visit. Let's just say that no one really needs to know that you're here. I take it you're an expert on humble clients? I didn't get a response. There was a folder in front of him and nothing else. Do you know where Nihao is? Yes, actually I do. I've never been there, but as far as I understand, few people have been there. Sonia Hurd owns, or rather rents, a small house on Nihao. It doesn't make sense. Nihao is a closed island. I thought no one lived there except a few locals and the owners. That's right. Let's assume that some exceptions have been made with regard to Sonia Hurd. Good. You've caught my attention. What do Sonia Hurd and Nihao Island have to do with me? Things are not going well with the trial. The situation is confusing and getting more confusing. Malcolm's family is spending every cent they have to get Sonia crucified. She is concerned about how all this will affect her children and wants to protect them from it. What does this have to do with me? Sonia is sending her children to Nihao until all this mess settles down. It's the only place she thinks they'll be free of it. She wants you to go with them. You must be joking. I'm the one who threatened to kill them. I am the last person on earth who can be trusted with these children. It doesn't seem to make sense to us either. We don't know why she chose you. I didn't expect this. It didn't make sense. Of course, I would never do anything to harm the children, but I didn't even know them that well. I only saw them at random meetings and never really got attached to them. What about Sonia's parents? Her father has Alzheimer's disease, and that's all her mother can do to take care of him. Besides, the children would still have come to the attention of the media if they had stayed with them. Why Nihao? There's no electricity, no running water, and they don't even have a school or grocery store. That's right. I'm sorry, Mr. Malik, but I have absolutely no experience in caring for children. You've definitely reached out to the wrong guy. In fact, you will not take care of the children as such. Their babysitter will accompany you to look after everything. For what? For everything. She will cook, clean, and run the household. Good. What will I do? Mr. Malik seemed a little puzzled by this question. I don't have a good answer to this question. Sonia said she would like you to be there, but refused to go into details. I'm not sure, but I think she'll want you to teach them at home so they don't have to go to school on one of the other islands. I also think she thinks it's important for them to be influenced by a man. She seems to think highly of you for some reason. What does this mean? What? You said that, for some reason, she seems to have a high opinion of me. What did you mean by that? We were a little puzzled by her choice in this matter. All we know about you, Mr. Sorensen, is what we read in the newspaper and a little research on your biography. I mean the company, have not understood why it chose you. I didn't mean to offend you in any way. Please don't misinterpret my words. Can I have some coffee? Wilfred got up and left the room. It gave me some time to think. Sonia must have been out of her mind, or else she was extremely smart. She has always been a calm and collected person. I had to believe that she knew exactly what she was doing when she chose me. I didn't know why, but it didn't really matter yet. The coffee smelled better than it tasted. What will it give me? Why would I even agree to such an absurdity? She hoped that you would feel guilty for your actions and openly stated that she wanted to take advantage of it. Did she really say that? Yes. She also offered $2,000 a week, which will be automatically credited to your account in the Cayman Islands. Do you know about my account in the Cayman Islands? We know everything. Actually, there's not much to know about you. You are a very ordinary person, Mr. Sorensen. If I agree, when will I need to leave? There's a private jet leaving Dulles Airport at noon tomorrow. Our staff will help you get ready and take care of your home and personal affairs while you are away. I didn't know much about airplanes. All I knew for sure was that it was a jet plane, not a Boeing 747. I assumed it was big enough to cross the Pacific Ocean and get to Hawaii, otherwise they wouldn't have used it. My escort loaded my bags for me, and I stood next to him and tried to pretend that I knew what I was doing, which, of course, was completely wrong. I tried to take with me everything I thought I might need. It would be nice to have some kind of guide. What bothered me the most was the fact that there was no electricity on the island. I'm not sure how relevant the information I gleaned from the computer was, but it didn't look encouraging. Just in case, I took my mobile phone and charger. I also packed my laptop. I had no idea how to charge batteries or use electronic equipment without electricity. I scolded myself for not learning more about solar energy. I was wondering how my satellite cellular connection works. By the time I was completely confused, a limousine with the main passengers had arrived. There were 2 boys and a girl. The eldest boy, Brian, looked to be about 16 years old. The girl, Glenna, was at least a year younger, and the last of all was Chaz, who looked no more than 12 years old. I introduced myself and was surprised that they all seemed pleasant and well-mannered to me. As a rule, I usually don't like children. Everything was going fine until it came to the nanny. I wasn't sure, but she seemed to be from somewhere in Central America. Maya was barely 150 centimeters tall. I assumed she was not yet 30, but she looked older. I was very bad at understanding women. She walked past me as if I had leprosy. The look she gave me haunted me the whole trip. It was easy to see that she would not have chosen me for this trip. I still couldn't figure out what made Sonia think I was the best option for her. Maya treated the children like a drill instructor. They listened to her and did what she said, not out of fear or obedience, but because they seemed to want to. I was impressed. After the novelty of the takeoff, I spent time trying to establish mutual understanding with each of the children. It would be much easier if I knew what they like and what they don't like. I quickly discovered that they knew all about my threat and why I did it. And yet they didn't seem to be afraid of me. There was no doubt that Maya knew because she was staring at me. Brian was interested in computers and everything related to them. He was disappointed when he found out that there was no electricity in Nihao. His eyes lit up a little when I told him that I had brought my laptop on board, and he seemed to react when I asked him if he knew anything about solar energy or satellite communications. Brian and I were going to get along great. Glenna was looking forward to the opportunity to swim and learn how to surf. Most of all, she was worried that there would be no beach near US, and if there was, it would be too stormy for swimming. I promised to help her find a way to get to the water, but I couldn't help her surf. We had a little laugh about it. She hoped that she would also have the opportunity to ride. Chaz was upset because there were no snakes on the islands. He was looking forward to the opportunity to collect as many animals as possible. After his words, I told him that I was relieved to learn that St. Patrick had chased away all the snakes. He took great pleasure in putting me in order. I knew I wouldn't get a chance to talk to Maya. It was quite clear from her expression and gestures that she wanted nothing to do with me. I could tell that she didn't like my interaction with the children. I found myself looking at her while she was sleeping. Her skin was a bronze color with a slight sheen. The lips and nose were slightly flatter and wider than usual. The eyebrows were dark and thick. It didn't take me long to remember that her eyes were dark and deep too. She was beautiful, exotic, and very intriguing. We made a stop in Seattle and had dinner at the airport while the plane was refueling. I was surprised to find that Maya speaks English perfectly, without the slightest accent. She didn't talk to me, but I noticed her when she was with the kids. As the flight continued, it became more and more interesting. The children slept all the way from Seattle to the islands. Maya slept for a while. When she wasn't sleeping, she was watching me. It was obvious that she knew about the letter and was more worried about it than the children. The next stage of our trip was a seaplane flight, which, according to the children, was really cool. After that, we went by helicopter directly to Nihao. A small group of people were already waiting for us, and I tried my best to stay in the shadows. It was obvious that they were trying to keep everything a secret. 2 hours later, a jeep that looked like a jitney took us to our new home. It was a typical bungalow on the island, somewhat modernized. While the children and Maya were moving to a new place, I went around the whole building. It had a tin or metal roof with large enclosed gutters to collect rainwater. I checked ahead of time, and all my information seemed to indicate that it was a relatively dry island. I was sure that no one would bother to install such a system if it wasn't cost-effective. The collected water was sent to 3 rather large fiberglass tanks installed high under the roof on the west side of the building. The entire south side of the roof was covered with solar panels. There were 3 different types of panels, but they all had the same angle of inclination. I was curious to see exactly how solar energy is used. Chaz was fascinated by a small flock of free-range chickens gathered around a small coop in the backyard. There may have been no bacon, but it looks like we're going to have a lot of eggs. I was still trying to remain inconspicuous. The guy who dropped us off was just finishing explaining to Maya when I walked into the house. He was supposed to deliver groceries and other supplies to us every Tuesday morning. He gave Maya some forms that she could use to place orders for the next week. I decided not to stick my nose in this case. Maya was a professional, and I just decided to play along. I still had no idea why I was here. There was a propane tank in the backyard that needed to be checked and refilled monthly. In addition to the stove, there was an antique refrigerator running on propane. I haven't seen anything like this since I was a kid. There were plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables. Brian announced that he had taken over a small bedroom in the southern part of the house. The door led to a storage room for solar panels. At first, I was worried until I noticed that the room was fully ventilated. In addition to the batteries, there was a whole bunch of wires and switches. It scared the hell out of me, but it fascinated Brian. He couldn't wait to get his hands dirty. As a result, I had to share a room with Chaz. He thought it was cool. Maya wasn't thrilled about it, but I had nowhere else to sleep. Of course, she didn't offer to share a room with her, and I didn't expect that. Maya has prepared a small set of fresh fruits for dinner. She didn't seem to be in the mood to cook, and I understood why. 10 minutes after we finished eating, Chaz was fast asleep on the couch, and everyone else was ready for bed. About half an hour later, I heard a soft cry. Maya was the first to try the shower without heating. I was relieved to find out that this was the whole point. It also made me laugh a little. By the time I got up, Maya had already set the table. These were, of course, fruits and eggs with freshly squeezed juice. Chaz was walking around with a big smile on his face because he was the one collecting the eggs. It wasn't difficult for Maya to assign him the same task every morning. I found that I didn't like shaving with cold water, and a cold shower didn't excite me either. The water wasn't exactly icy, but it wasn't warm either. I also realized that I would need new clothes if I was going to stay here for a long time. When I finished my morning ritual of tidying up, I found myself at home alone. I stood on the porch and looked at the valley spread out in front of me. The ocean turned out to be closer than I had initially thought. At the bottom of the hill, I spotted Maya with Glenna and Chaz. Brian wasn't with them. I watched them leave the road and walk over rocks and sand to the water. Chaz was wandering everywhere. Glenna walked right into the surf and just stood there, completely motionless. They were almost a kilometer away from me, so I could only see their basic movements. Maya sat down on one of the ledges of the rock and watched them. I turned my attention to the house when I heard some sounds from the back. I noticed that Brian was sitting in the middle of the pantry with a tablet in his hands. He was so focused that I couldn't believe he hadn't heard me enter the room. A quick glance showed that he was drawing a diagram of all the wiring and equipment in the house. I felt a little relieved that he had found something to occupy himself so quickly. "Mr. Sorensen, what type of cellular connection do you have?" I guess I wasn't as quiet as I thought I was. "This is Verizon. I brought it with me because I was hoping that we could set up satellite reception." "Does he support working on the internet?" "Internet, email, GPS, and text messages. I don't use most of these functions, but the phone does almost everything. Do you mind if I use it a little?" I was going to use it only in emergencies, because we don't have the ability to recharge it. Brian smiled broadly at me. "No problem. It looks like we'll be able to recharge anything by the end of the day. Do you need a laptop too?" "Not until tomorrow. I will be able to connect my laptop to the internet via my mobile phone." "I assume you have an unlimited data plan?" "I want to get my laptop and mobile phone." When I returned, Brian had already moved into his room, where he had a desk standing along the wall connected to the utility room. I didn't know where he got this table from. He placed both objects on the back of the table and continued to work on his drawings. "I need to order something so we can get settled. I have my own PayPal account, so don't worry about it. The mail won't arrive until next Tuesday, but I have a lot to do until then." I had no answer or comment for him. He seemed to know exactly what he was doing, and there was nothing I could do to help him. As I turned to leave, I heard him say, "By the way, this third section of solar panels is not designed to collect energy, but for a solar-powered hot water system. Everything will be fine as soon as I can install a DC pump of sufficient power. Do you want to work on it?" A cunning little scoundrel. He took control of the situation and has already begun to distribute responsibilities. I just smiled and nodded, leaving him alone with his work. I needed to do something, and it seemed interesting to me to set up a hot water supply system. Maya, Glenna, and Chaz were still down by the water. It was only a 10-minute walk, or maybe a little longer. Chaz discovered several tidal pools and was busy checking them for the presence of living creatures. Glenna walked further down the beach, but was still within sight. I sat down next to Maya and was rewarded with a look that indicated that my presence was not appreciated. I was going to try to start some kind of conversation with her, but then I changed my mind. This could not be forced. Maya seemed to hate me and made it clear to me without difficulty. We sat quietly until Glenna returned, and then we all went to the bungalow. Chaz wanted to stay all day, but reacted immediately when Maya called him. Chaz chatted all the way home. Maya didn't say anything. Glenna had only one comment: "I need to find a surfboard somewhere." Since then, everything seemed to be back to normal. Every day, Chaz got up early and went somewhere unknown. At first, he spent most of his time at the tidal pools. As he became more familiar with the surroundings, he became more adventurous. He was lost in the jungle around the house. There were no venomous snakes or other dangerous animals on the islands. I wasn't worried about his well-being at all. Surprisingly, Maya didn't seem to be worried either. Maya still didn't get any friendlier, but at least she started chatting. There were things that needed to be done, and in order for them to happen, she had to talk to me. I accepted the situation and did not insist. Her skin seemed to shine in the sun. Brian lived in his own world. I tried to stay out of his way as much as I could. I didn't have the sense to give him any advice. His desk looked like a rat's nest of wires and makeshift boxes. The cell phone was no longer a portable device. Somehow, it was permanently connected to the solar electrical system, and a laptop computer was connected to it. We had a telephone connection to anywhere in the world. In addition, we had internet access via phone. Glenna managed to persuade Brian to help her, and the next morning she had her own surfboard. Now she spent her days at the beach trying to learn how to surf. In the evenings, Brian showed her videos that he had found on the internet during the day. That was Maya's problem. She refused to let Glenna go to the water alone. 3 days later, Maya finally felt the need to talk to me about something other than business. "Mr. Sorensen, it's hard for me to say this, but I need your help." She caught my attention, and I sat down, waiting for the second shoe to fall. I swear, she was getting prettier every day. "I have responsibilities for washing, cleaning, cooking, and other household chores. I can't sit on the beach with Glenna all day, but I shouldn't leave her alone. Do you want me to start doing housework?" This made me grin with displeasure. "No, I need you to look after Glenna while I do what I need to do around the house. I'm not happy to leave you alone with any of them, but there's nothing you can do. What is your problem with me? Can I explain something that will make you feel better about this whole situation?" "I read the letter, Mr. Sorensen. The last thing I want is to leave you with them. Mrs. Hurd seems to think you're not a threat. She told me to trust you. I do not know why she said that, but on the other hand, I do not know you at all. I have a job to do. I have to do it, even though I don't want to." She was right. I tried my best to look sincere. "Maya, I would never do anything that would hurt children. When I wrote this letter, it hurt me. I know it was a terrible thing to do, but I was desperate. I was bitter because my marriage had just broken up. Sonia asked me to come here for a reason. It must have something to do with the children. I'll deal with it. In the meantime, I will be ready to do everything in my power to help you and try to earn your trust." "Good. You will start tomorrow, immediately after delivery." "What kind of delivery?" "A truck is arriving with mail, food, supplies, and things that Brian ordered. Next week, we will receive a large shipment of clothes and personal items that we could not take with us on the plane. Some of this will be from your apartment." "How do you know all this?" "I talk to the island manager every day, as well as with Mr. Malik. Brian arranged everything so that I could keep an eye on what was going on. Everything will be fine next week, in case you need something else or have to do it." I had nothing to say. She was smart, competent, and well-organized. The warm climate and humidity gave her bronzed skin a glow that contrasted with her long black hair. She had been dressing more casually lately, which emphasized her full figure. I was still puzzled by her impeccable diction. "I need to cook dinner." She turned to leave. I decided that our conversation was over. "By the way, I hope there will be hot water in the shower next week." We both smiled. It was the first time. I felt better about our relationship. Tuesday morning was like Christmas. Instead of a Jeep, a small Isuzu truck came to us. There were several boxes for me, but most of the items were intended for children. Maya bought some ordinary vegetables and fruits and didn't look very happy. She had a list ready for the next week, which included the main products she wanted to purchase. Brian bought the most. The packages came from several sources and came in a variety of sizes and shapes. He was smiling from ear to ear as he carried the treasures to his room. I was dying to know what he was up to. The mail was on the lid of the refrigerator. We could review it later. Before our courier was about to leave, Glenna pulled him aside and whispered something in his ear. Maya didn't notice it. Our island Santa smiled and waved goodbye to Glenna. I was ready for our daily trip to the beach when Glenna told me she wasn't going. She wanted to make a list of her new things and put her room in order. I didn't mind until Brian came out and handed me the package. "This is for you, Mr. Sorensen." God, I'm going to have to get all these people to call me by my first name. Now I was the proud owner of a DC water pump. "All the PVC wiring and plumbing that you will need are in the battery room." When he left, I felt like a high school student preparing to complete a scientific project. As I passed Maya heading to the back of the house, I couldn't help but chuckle. "When I install this, I will need your help to test it." Maya looked at me in surprise, smiled, and then slapped me on the shoulder as I passed by. Things were starting to get better. I will not bore you with a description of all the difficulties of installing a solar-powered water pump. Let's just say there was a lot of swearing on my part, and there were a few laughs coming from Brian's room. I was so engrossed in what I was doing that I skipped lunch. All the pump did was lift the water to the top of the solar panels and let it drain into the shower. It didn't make the water scalding hot, but it made it a little more pleasant. Chaz was more than happy to be the first to take advantage of it. It would have been useless at night or on a cloudy, rainy day, but I was glad it worked at all. I started thinking about other projects that I could take on. I was on the roof and checking all the plumbing systems when I realized that someone was using the shower. This made it much easier for me to check for leaks. When I went downstairs, Maya was coming out of the shower wrapped in a towel. She gave me a confused look and disappeared into her room. It was worth the time if she was happy. Over the next few days, the situation improved. Out of nowhere, a local guy appeared, who was about 17 years old. Apparently, Glenna asked the courier if he knew anyone who could teach her how to surf. The guy's name was Teddy, and he lived about 5 kilometers from the beach. They seemed to find a common language right away. I didn't really like playing the role of an escort, but in this case I understood that it was necessary. I had to admit that she looked pretty good in a bathing suit. I no longer watched over Glenna to make sure she didn't get hurt, but now I was responsible for her chastity. That evening, I told Maya about this new event, and she was unhappy. Brian did his job without difficulty, and I have to admit that I envied his skills and knowledge. In just a few days, we had a fully configured computer system, including a printer and a telephone system with internet access. I would have loved to get my cell phone back, but the genius boy still needed it to connect to the internet. He assured me that he was working on it. Chaz lost interest in reservoirs and began spending almost all his time in the undergrowth. For some reason, neither Maya nor I were worried about him. Glenna was a big problem. It wasn't that she was doing anything wrong, but simply because she was a beautiful young girl with a gorgeous body who spent every day with a guy, a surfer from the island. I don't want to sound stereotypical, but I think that's the best way to describe him. There was nothing about Teddy that you wouldn't like, except for the fact that he was probably a horny teenager. Glenna shouldn't have flirted and turned on Teddy, but she was a teenage girl with raging hormones. Maya and I were in regular contact now. This usually concerned children or the house. She seemed to perceive me a little better, but she was still careful. She didn't like my interpretation of the relationship between Glenna and Teddy. She accused me of not watching them closely enough. She was right. A fairly large package arrived with a ton of homeschooling supplies. Chaz was not happy about all this, although Brian and Glenna were interested. Glenna was going to college before the end of the year, and Brian was on his way to getting where he wanted to go. It turned out that their mother had every reason to believe that they would not receive higher education. I decided it would be better if I didn't stick my nose in this case. However, Maya asked me to help by drawing up a kind of official schedule of classes and testing. I got my cell phone back when Brian figured out how to combine all his electronic devices to provide internet access. He got a satellite internet receiver powered by direct current from somewhere. An electronic panel was installed in his room, which turned on and recharged any electrical appliance powered by direct current. The first thing I did was call my parents. Everything was fine at home, but they hadn't seen Natalie or heard from her. I called Wilfred Malik because I didn't know who else could give me any news. The bad news from Malik was that he couldn't evict me from my apartment because Natalie had moved back in. It wasn't very good. Glenna decided to study early and surf after lunch. She and Teddy seemed to enjoy wandering behind some rocky ledges, just to tease me. I usually didn't pay attention to it, but one day I wanted to know more. When I got my cell phone back, I had the opportunity to take some pictures of Teddy and Glenna kissing and something else. Glenna was still in her bikini, but that didn't stop Teddy from exploring her body. My quiet cough interrupted the fun and allowed me to go home with the embarrassed young lady. When Maya saw the photos, she was convinced that my suspicions about Glenna were correct. Sometime later, I saw them talking alone on the back porch. I was glad Maya was here because it was a conversation I didn't want. When Maya finished talking to Glenna, she gave me a scolding that I remembered for a long time. She was unhappy with my lousy job of monitoring Glenna. Anyway, Brian completed all the school assignments and tests and contacted the admissions offices of several schools that interested him. I was impressed by his efforts. Chaz started acting a little weird too. After his day trips, Wherever he went, he usually sat in his room and made all sorts of notes and drawings. Brian bought him a small digital camera and showed him how to upload pictures to a new desktop computer that appeared out of nowhere. There were sockets from DC electrical appliances in every room of the house. The new computer Chaz was using was also equipped with a small scanner. He was turning into a geek, just like his brother, only more interested in biology than electronics. I got my laptop back at the same time as the DC-powered high-definition TV appeared. Things were going well, but I still wished from time to time that I had a microwave oven. For the next few weeks, everything went as usual. The highlight for me was Maya's admission that she did not believe that I had any intention of harming the children. She didn't go into details, and I didn't insist. Glenna had a birthday when she turned 18. Then the situation began to change rapidly. First, when Maya told me that I no longer needed to go to the beach with Glenna. I don't understand, Maya. You were very concerned about her safety and then her close relationship with Teddy. What has changed? I really trust Teddy. I think he knows what water is and how to behave on the waves. I believe he can protect Glenna. I don't think she'll hurt herself when he's around. Come on, Maya. You know what's going on between them. There's no way you're leaving them alone on a deserted beach. You know what's going to happen. Maya put down the laundry she was folding and looked at me. It was the first time she had ever called me by my first name. What does this mean? It means you didn't do a good job as a chaperone. She sighed as if she had failed at something. They already had it. We can't stop it now. I know because I was young once. We could let them figure it out on their own and stop upsetting each other. What if she gets pregnant? What the hell are you going to tell Sonia? A few weeks ago, I got Glenna to start taking birth control pills. I also talked to Mrs. Hurd about it. She understands everything and said that, in her opinion, it is normal and healthy. How did you write her a prescription for pills? Why didn't you tell me you were in touch with their mother? Maya grabbed the folded laundry and left the room. I don't want to talk about it anymore. It is necessary to fix several panels on the roof. Try to get this done before dinner, and no matter what you do, don't fall off the damn roof. I was fired. I could easily tell that Maya had provided me with all the information I needed. I was starting to feel comfortable with the whole situation, and now I felt like an outsider again. I spent the whole day on the roof hammering and moping about my inability to manage my own affairs. I was quiet and sullen at dinner. Glenna seemed happier than usual, and for good reason. Brian and Chaz were behaving as usual. Maya noticed that I was upset about the whole situation and let me know by sticking her tongue out at me when the kids weren't looking at me. I answered this with a slight smile. I spent the rest of the evening confused. Since I no longer had to sit with Glenna during the day, I had a lot of time to do housework. If I needed any parts or tools, I wrote them down in the list that Maya kept on the refrigerator. I still didn't have a clear idea of what my function was. The children studied at school themselves. Maya was doing household chores. All I had to do was hang around and play Mr. Fix-It. After one of the dinners, Chaz made a remark that interested me. He looked at Brian and just said, I miss Sarah. She was a much better cook than Maya. We talked a little more about cooking, but I was just wondering who the hell Sarah was and why she wasn't with us. I put the comment about Sarah aside in my hectic head. It wasn't important enough to stop there, but I wanted to remember something. I probably could have just asked one of the children about Sarah, but I was uncomfortable doing that. Out of the blue, Brian received an acceptance letter from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He was supposed to start classes in 4 weeks. It turned out that everything was organized without my knowledge. I guess I didn't need to know about it. I insisted that before leaving, he prepare a manual explaining everything about the electrical system in the house in a way that I could understand. He decided that this was a good challenge and started it. He also prepared Glenna for her final exams and helped her apply to college. Now I was really confused. If Sonia was going to let the children leave the safe island to go to college, then why were we sent here in the first place and what did they want to protect the children from? I was the idiot who threatened to kill them and I was ignored. I should have assumed that they were here to protect them from any unpleasant news regarding the death of their father and the prosecution of their mother, but with our television and the internet, this was not the case. My presence seemed superficial. Maya laughed when she saw that I had added a 6-pack of beer to the list of supplies. At night, when the monsoon started, things got a little more complicated. I think it was just a big storm, but we all like to call it the monsoon. It rained all day, and Ches never came back for dinner. Maya and I left Glenna and Brian at home and went looking for him. The incessant rain turned everything into mud. I accidentally found out that his favorite place was in a deep ravine south of the house. That's where we found him. He was fine. It's just stuck. The sides of the ravine were steep. Under normal conditions, Chaz could easily climb up and down without problems. The rain changed the situation. What used to be a foothold has now turned into slippery mud. Maya immediately plopped down on the side of the trail. By this time, she was soaked to the skin. I couldn't help but notice that she didn't have a bra under her t-shirt. While I was distracted, I suddenly felt both my legs fly into the air, and I landed next to a wet and dirty Guatemalan beauty. Chaz was laughing his head off. He was covered in sticky mud too, but it didn't seem to bother him too much. It took us about 10 minutes to get him out of the ravine. Maya scolded him a little, but nothing he didn't deserve. I was just glad that we found it safe and sound, and that Maya wasn't wearing a bra. Oh, have I mentioned this before? The rain helped wash away some of the dirt before we returned to the house, but not all of it. Maya made us leave our shoes outside and then shoved Chaz into the shower. He handed her his dirty clothes, and in return she gave him a towel to wrap himself up in. Glenna took him to his room. I don't know why, but I decided to join Maya in the shower. She was still dressed when I came in. At first she seemed surprised, but suddenly relaxed and turned her back on me. She covered herself with her hands. I took some shampoo and sprinkled it on the top of her head. When I started washing her hair, she froze and seemed to hold her breath. After a few moments, she exhaled and began to breathe normally. She turned her head to make it easier for me to access. I had to turn her around to wash off the foam, and she didn't resist. When I started to pull her shirt over her head, she raised her arms. When I started washing her body, she started taking off my wet clothes. A few minutes later, we were both naked. We both breathed faster and deeper. Making love in the shower was definitely uncomfortable, but it was definitely erotic. It took both of us less than 5 minutes to break a sweat. Thank God it didn't take any longer, because Brian was banging on the door, wanting to know if everything was okay. I went out first, wrapped in a towel. When I passed Glenna and Brian in the living room, they were both giggling. I couldn't figure out if this was a good thing or a bad thing. All I know is that I felt good at that moment. When I entered the room, Chaz was fast asleep. He must have had a hard day. I decided to lie down for a minute and didn't wake up until the next morning. I expected to see a cheerful housekeeper the next morning, but I only got a dissatisfied one. I was confused, but I couldn't discuss the problem in front of the children. After a while, Glenna, Brian, and Chaz broke up, and Maya and I were left alone. Maya, I'm confused. You seem a little out of sorts. Did I do something wrong? If I did that, I'm sorry. I had no intention of forcing you to do something you didn't want to do. She put down the plate she was wiping. No, you didn't do anything wrong. I did it. I'm sorry you feel that way about it. It won't happen again. She slapped the table with her palm. No, damn it. That's not the point. It's not about you or what you've done. I don't understand. Maya brought 2 cups of fresh coffee and sat down at the table next to me. Do you remember how I talked to Glenna about 2 weeks ago? The day you caught her kissing Terry? Yes. I thought you did a good job. What went wrong? I gave Glenna birth control pills. I didn't use them, or let's just say I didn't need them. I thought she would benefit more from them than I would. At that time, I didn't plan or expect anything to happen between us. I took a long sip of coffee, even though it was too hot. You mean there's a possibility that… She interrupted me before I could finish. Don't even say it or think about it. I won't know anything for a few weeks. In the meantime, keep this thing in your pants. She noticed that I looked a little depressed. At least until I buy more pills. There was a slight smile on her face as she turned to the sink. For some strange reason, I was hoping that she was expecting a baby. I barely knew this woman, but the thought of becoming the father of her child thrilled me. I couldn't explain it. Chaz and I spent most of the day installing a new roof on the chicken coop. It was still too dirty for him to get to his hideout. I was in a good mood all day. We watched the news on TV, but not regularly, so we were pretty damn shocked when Sonia Hurd showed up at our house the following week. I felt like an outsider again, so I stayed away and let her spend time with her children. Maya took me aside and briefly told me what had happened. It seems that the prosecutor quietly dropped all charges against Sonia, and she was released as quietly as possible. She immediately came to see her children and hide from the press. Apparently, she did a pretty good job, because when we checked the news, everyone was speculating about her whereabouts. It turned out that a lot of evidence was collected immediately after the murder. None of them were compromised or planted, and none of them were directly related to Sonia. The prosecutor did everything possible to connect at least something with her, but he couldn't. Sonia's lawyer remained silent all this time. They did not protest or seek to have the case dismissed. They were just waiting for the case to fall apart on its own. Sonia spent all this time in prison, although she probably could have been released much earlier. All I could think about was, what does all this have to do with me and why am I here? The Jeep that Sonia had driven to our house was still there. When Maya and I were sitting on the porch, the children began to pack things from home. Sonia finally came over. I really want to thank you guys for your help. I couldn't have done it without your help. She was too kind. Maya wasted no time in responding to the thanks. Mrs. Hurd, Sarah and I will never be able to fully thank you for all your help. You don't have to thank me. We will always be in your debt. I just sat there like a fool. All this did not fit into my head. That name sounded against Sarah. Who the hell is Sarah and what does she have to do with all this? Did you like it, Robert? She took me by surprise. I pulled myself together and just said, yes, I guess so. You're not sure? Sonia, I still don't understand why I'm here. I still didn't understand what I was supposed to do. Since you're here, maybe I can get an explanation? Around this time, 3 children ran out of the house and threw their bags into the Jeep. Maya, we are going to the Big Island for about a week. I'll leave you here with Robert to rest. When we get back, we can discuss what's going to happen next, and I'll explain everything to Robert. Sonia turned around and got into the Jeep with the children. They all waved at me and drove away a moment later. I looked at Maya, and there was a slight feline smile on her face. I was confused, and she was smiling. Do you want to go and fool around? I couldn't believe it, but I heard it. Did you get your new pills? Don't be silly. I'm pregnant. There's no point worrying about pills right now. We spent most of the day in bed. Of course, I was glad that I decided to take this trip. The dinner was quiet, without children. In fact, it was quiet between us. After a whole day of intimacy, we still seemed detached. There were many unanswered questions. I was here with a woman I wanted to stay with and have a baby with, and I knew very little about her. It was hard to explain. Maya, who is Sarah? My sister. She answered the question, but without going into further explanation, she only complicated it. How does it fit into the overall picture? Besides being your sister, what does she have to do with this family? Maya got up from the table and brought me a bottle of my precious beer. Sarah and I both worked for Mrs. Hurd. She cooked, and I took care of the children and the household. Where is she now? Maya went to get a beer for herself. Robert, I'm not trying to be complicated. I want to tell you everything, but it's a little difficult. I upset her. This was not my intention. Now I felt guilty, but it also hurt that she was hiding something from me. She was drinking beer from a glass. Robert, what stage is your marriage at? What I'm really trying to figure out is, are you still going to be married when this is all over? I thought she was going to file for divorce when I left, but she didn't, and I don't know why. I also have no idea what the status of the case is now. If she doesn't file for divorce soon, I will. It's hard to do anything or learn anything from here. The beer was delicious. It could have been a little colder, but that's okay. Why do you speak perfect English without an accent if you were from Guatemala? I've been living in the States since I was 3 years old. Sarah and I studied English on Sesame Street. We had a good relationship. I hoped it would continue to be like this, but I have a habit of saying the wrong thing. Why didn't you kill Mr. Hurd, Robert? Can I have another beer? I handed her the empty bottle. Maya, I felt more offended and humiliated than eager for revenge. I was angry, but not angry enough to kill. She handed me a new bottle. This is the last one. Enjoy. Robert, are you happy that I'm having a baby, or are you upset? I'm very happy for the child, but I am worried about what will happen between us. That's a good answer. There was a short pause. I'm sure she had more questions. I know that I had. It's time to shut up. Maya, what has Sarah done and why is she not with us? Before I knew it, I was alone in the kitchen. Maya ran out of the room and out of the house. I finished cleaning up after dinner and went out on the porch. She was sitting on the top step and admiring the sunset. It was beautiful, but there were tears in her eyes. I sat next to her and didn't say anything. It took at least 10 minutes until the last rays of daylight disappeared over the horizon. It was a quiet 10 minutes. She looked at me and took my hand. Robert, Mrs. Hurd didn't kill her husband. Sarah did. He was hitting his hands and feet and wasn't going to stop. Sarah grabbed a knife and plunged it into him. Mrs. Hurd told the police that it was her fault so that Sarah would have time to escape. I believe she returned to Guatemala, but I'm not sure. Mrs. Hurd never said she actually killed him, just said it was her fault. That's why the police still had to prove it. I hugged Maya tightly to me and kissed her temple. It wasn't a passionate kiss, but just to comfort her. We stood on the porch for a few more minutes without saying a word, and then went to bed. There was nothing that night. We tried to make the next day as normal as possible, but we couldn't do it without the kids. I received an email from Malik. It only said, "Check the report on serious crimes." I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but eventually I found it. Assistant Secretary of Agriculture William Frommett was found shot to death this morning in Warrenton, Virginia. Police found his body in a hot tub, along with the body of Natalie Sorensen, a public relations analyst at a consulting firm in Alexandria. Several shots were fired at both victims at close range. The shooting was reported by Mildred Frommett, the victim's wife, who was waiting for the police to arrive. Mrs. Frommett was taken into custody pending charges. Natalie Sorensen has also been linked to Malcolm Hurd, who was murdered earlier this year. I printed out the news article and gave it to Maya to read, but I didn't stay to see her reaction. I think Natalie had a weakness for politicians. I just wanted her to be a little more restrained. I called my parents. They told me that Natalie's relatives are on their way to pick up her body and bring it home. I felt sorry for them. They were good people and didn't deserve their daughter to end up like this. I used to love Natalie and couldn't help but feel some sadness over her passing. Sonia already knew about Natalie's death when they returned to Nihao. She took the time to sit down and talk to me. It took her an hour to explain the circumstances of Malcolm's death, but I still didn't understand why she sent me here. I think I asked her this question directly twice, and each time she evaded the answer. I realized that she wasn't going to give me an answer, and I stopped trying. They were all going back to the States. Brian was going to enter the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and Glenna entered the University of Hawaii ahead of schedule. She convinced her mother that it was important for her to be somewhere where she could surf. Chaz was a big problem for Sonia. He didn't want to leave Nihao. He didn't want to leave the house. He was only 12, so he had no choice, but his mother was willing to compromise. There was one catch. Maya and I had to agree to stay at Nihao until Chaz was ready to go to college. Chaz spent summers and any extended vacations with us, but had to stay with his mother for the rest of the year. I didn't know what salary Maya was getting, but my salary was supposed to grow from $2,000 a week to $1,000 a month. It was a hell of a cut, but I was still going to get paid and have free housing for doing nothing. I was also going to do it with my own little toy. Things got even better because the money I had hidden in the Cayman Islands was now available. That evening, Sonia cooked dinner for everyone while Maya and I were walking along the beach. We needed a private place to talk. It was a serious decision that required careful consideration. It took us at least 5 minutes to make a decision. A week later, we were alone. We missed the kids, but they promised to keep in touch. One day, Teddy came to visit us. He looked a little depressed until I told him that Glenna would start studying at the University of Hawaii next month. We didn't see him again, but he left happy. When I sold my business, there was no non-competition clause in the contract. As long as I didn't contact any of my former clients, I could continue doing business as before. Brian left me a small computer as a legacy, and a week later my new business started working. A month later, Malik called and informed me that Natalie had an insurance policy for $500,000 and that I was the sole recipient. Maya wants 3 more children. End.